My family swore I was a Navy dropout. I stayed quiet at my brother's seal ceremony. Then his general met my gaze and said, "Colonel, you're here." The crowd went still. My father's jaw dropped to the floor. What if the very people who were supposed to protect you, the ones who raised you, became the architects of your deepest heartbreak? 4 years. I carried the weight of a betrayal so profound, it shattered my world and forced me to rebuild it from nothing. Growing up in suburban Boston, our colonial home, with its manicured lawn and white picket fence, was a carefully constructed facade. Inside, a different reality simmered, thick with unspoken rules and a deeply ingrained favoritism that colored every interaction. My mother, Carol, wielded her influence like a velvet-gloved iron fist. She'd beam at neighbors, then dissect their flaws the second they left. My father, Robert, was her quiet opposite, a man perpetually nodding along, always striving for a peace that rarely came. Then there was my sister, Brittany, 3 years my senior. She was Carol's golden child, blonde, beautiful, and effortlessly charming. Brittany was the cheerleader, the homecoming queen, the girl every boy wanted. And me, I was the family's black sheep. While Brittany obsessed over makeup and social calendars, I found solace in books and computer code. My bedroom walls, unlike hers, weren't adorned with boy band posters, but academic awards. By 14, I taught myself 3 programming languages and built my first website. None of this, however, ever seemed to impress Carol. "Computers are for boys, Olivia," she'd declare with a dismissive wave. "You'll never find a husband hiding behind those screens." Every one of my achievements was met with that same frustrating response. "That's nice, dear. But did you hear about Brittany's new modeling opportunity?" It felt like Brittany's temporary jobs and fleeting ventures were celebrated, while my consistent academic excellence was relegated to an afterthought. My father, Robert, would sometimes sneak into my room after these exchanges, an awkward pat on the shoulder, a mumbled, "Your mother means well. She just worries about you." But his eyes told a different story. He saw the blatant favoritism, but never found the courage to challenge it. The summer before my senior year, I won a national coding competition, securing a full college scholarship. When I excitedly shared the news at dinner, Carol's response was a chilling, "Well, I suppose that's one way to get to college, since you won't be getting any athletic scholarships like Brittany did." My father stared at his plate, silent, as Brittany smirked across the table. That night, a quiet fire ignited within me. This scholarship wasn't just tuition, it was my ticket out. I applied only to colleges at least 3 states away. When my MIT acceptance letter arrived, I celebrated in secret. Carol's only comment, a faint concern about me moving so far from family. MIT became my sanctuary. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who genuinely valued my intelligence and my almost obsessive passion for technology. I met my best friend, Harper, during orientation week. We both lunged for the same computer science textbook at the campus bookstore. "You can have it," she laughed, a genuine, easy sound. "I'll just copy your notes when you inevitably understand everything better than me anyway." Her honesty, her humor, it was a breath of fresh air. Through Harper, I slowly started to piece together the confidence my family had systematically chipped away. She couldn't wrap her head around why I dreaded going home during breaks. "Your family sounds like a bad reality TV show," she'd declare after I'd recounted some new absurdity involving Carol and Brittany. "You know that's not normal, right?" Intellectually, I knew. But emotionally, I still ached for their approval, hoping each time I went home that things would be different. They never were. If anything, the stark contrast between my vibrant college life and the suffocating atmosphere at home only highlighted the dysfunction. By junior year, my visits were limited to major holidays. Each time I returned, I felt increasingly alien in the house I'd grown up in. My newfound independence seemed to actively annoy Carol, who doubled down on her criticisms. "MIT is making you cold," she accused, when I refused to indulge Brittany's latest dramatic tale about a breakup. "You used to be such a sweet girl." The truth was, I was finally finding my voice. For the first time, I started pushing back, politely but firmly. Robert watched these exchanges, a mix of concern and, I dared to hope, pride in his eyes. During the winter break of my senior year, when Carol suggested I dress more like Brittany for a neighborhood party, I calmly replied, "I'm comfortable with how I look, Mom." The stunned expression on her face? Priceless, and worth every second of the silent treatment that followed. Little did I know, this budding strength would be tested in ways I couldn't even imagine when I brought home the first man I truly loved. His name was Noah Miller, and I met him at a tech conference during my senior year. He was presenting a startup's innovative app designed to connect small local businesses with consumers. His presentation was confident, never arrogant, technical, yet completely accessible. As he fielded questions, he seemed genuinely interested in feedback, not just defending his ideas. I was so impressed. After his session, I worked up the courage to approach him with some suggestions for his user interface. Instead of dismissing me, he actually pulled out a notebook and asked me to elaborate. We talked for over an hour, eventually relocating to a nearby coffee shop when the conference room closed. He had these warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and a habit of running his hand through his dark hair when deep in thought. "Your perspective is exactly what this project needs," he said, as we nursed our third cup of coffee. "Would you be interested in meeting again to discuss this further?" That initial meeting blossomed into weekly coffee dates, then coding sessions at the campus library, and eventually real dates. Noah was unlike anyone I'd ever encountered. Brilliant, yet humble. Ambitious, yet ethical. He listened when I spoke, truly valued my opinions. For the first time, I felt genuinely seen. Our relationship deepened rapidly over the next few months. We'd spend hours talking about everything, from algorithmic efficiency to our favorite childhood cartoons. He shared his dreams of building technology that would truly improve lives, not just generate profit. I even found myself opening up about my family dynamics, something I rarely discussed with anyone besides Harper. "They sound challenging," he said carefully after I described a particularly painful Christmas, where Carol had compared my academic scholarship to Brittany's beauty pageant win, declaring only one of those would last beyond. "Youth, your intelligence and passion are incredible gifts, Olivia," Noah continued, looking directly at me. "Anyone who can't see that isn't seeing you clearly." By spring break, we were serious enough that I invited him home to meet my family. Part of me, I admit, wanted to show off this incredible man who valued exactly what my family seemed to dismiss about me. Another part, a small, hopeful part, genuinely wished that seeing me with someone like Noah might finally make Carol recognize my worth. The visit started, well, promisingly enough. My father, Robert, seemed genuinely interested in Noah's business, asking thoughtful questions about his startup's growth strategy. Carol was uncharacteristically warm, serving her famous Sunday roast, a meal usually reserved for Brittany's boyfriends. "You've done well for yourself, Noah," Carol purred, refilling his wine glass for the third time. "Stanford, Google, and now your own company at such a young age. Very impressive." I should have recognized the chilling gleam in her eye. It wasn't approval of my choice. It was an assessment, an asset valuation. Brittany arrived halfway through dinner, making what I now realize was a meticulously calculated late entrance. She claimed she was just in the area and decided to drop by, despite living a good 40 minutes away. She was, conveniently, between boyfriends at the time, and had recently been let go from her receptionist job at a local real estate office. My sister swept into the dining room in a form-fitting dress, hair and makeup flawless, completely contradicting her, just swung by narrative. She kissed everyone hello, then lingered a beat too long when she reached Noah. I watched her hand rest on his shoulder as she leaned in. "So, you're the genius programmer Olivia's been hiding from us," she cooed, with a laugh that somehow implied I'd been keeping secrets, rather than simply living my life 3 states away. Throughout the rest of dinner, Brittany inserted herself into every conversation, strategically highlighting any perceived connection she had with Noah. They discovered they both enjoyed hiking, though Brittany had gone precisely once for a photo shoot. They both loved sushi, despite Brittany usually complaining about raw fish. They both enjoyed indie films, though Brittany typically fell asleep during anything without explosions or romance. I watched Noah carefully during these exchanges, relieved to see him respond politely, but always returning his attention to me or my father after Brittany's interruptions. When she asked about his business model, claiming a secret interest in tech entrepreneurship that was news to literally everyone else at the table. He gave brief answers before turning to me. "Olivia's actually been helping me refine the algorithm," he said, squeezing my hand under the table. She spotted inefficiencies I'd missed entirely. Carol cleared her throat. "Well, isn't that nice? Brittany has quite a head for business, too. You know, she nearly majored in marketing before deciding on communications." "I changed because marketing seemed too limiting," Brittany quickly added. "I wanted something broader." What she conveniently omitted was that she'd failed the introductory marketing course twice before switching majors. Despite these unsettling undercurrents, the weekend visit ended on a positive note. Noah and I drove back to Cambridge, and he genuinely seemed impressed with my family. "Your mother really went all out with that dinner," he commented. "And your sister is certainly energetic." I laughed, a nervous, tight sound. "That's one way to put it." "Your dad seems great too," he continued, "though quieter than I expected based on your stories." "He's different when Carol's around," I explained, more subdued. Noah nodded thoughtfully, but didn't comment further. Over the next few weeks, our relationship deepened even more. Late one night, as we lay looking at the stars from the roof of his apartment building, Noah broached our future for the first time. "Have you thought about what happens after graduation?" he asked, his fingers intertwined with mine. "Job hunting, I guess," I replied. "I've had a few interviews lined up." "What if?" He hesitated. "What if you came to work with me instead? We could expand the business together. Your skills complement mine perfectly." My heart hammered in my chest. "Are you serious?" "Completely. And maybe," he squeezed my hand, "maybe we could look for an apartment together, too. If you wanted." For the first time, I allowed myself to truly envision a future where I was genuinely, profoundly happy. A life built with someone who valued me for exactly who I was. I turned to kiss him, overwhelmed with emotion. "I'll take that as a yes," he whispered against my lips. Little did I know, as I drifted off, dreaming of our shared future, that unseen forces were already meticulously at work, ensuring that future would never, ever happen. My final semester at MIT should have been exhilarating. I had promising job prospects, a capstone project turning heads, and a relationship that finally offered the emotional anchor I'd always craved. Instead, it became the period where my entire world imploded. The signs were subtle at first. Noah started taking longer to reply to texts. Our daily phone calls dwindled to every other day, then just twice a week. He canceled our standing Friday night date 3 weeks in a row, always citing crucial investor meetings that somehow ran mysteriously late. "I'm so sorry, babe," he'd say, sounding genuinely regretful. "This round of funding is everything. Once it's secured, things will calm down, I promise." And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? His startup was at a critical growth stage. I understood the demands of the tech world. I was buried in my own capstone project, too, spending long, exhausting hours in the lab. But still, a nagging feeling persisted. Something was off. One evening, innocently scrolling through Instagram, a post from a restaurant in my hometown caught my eye. It was a picture of their famous chocolate lava cake, the caption bragging about a special visitor from the tech world. In the blurred background, unmistakable, was Noah's profile. My stomach plunged. He told me he was in New York that weekend, meeting investors. What was he doing 3 hours in the opposite direction, back in my hometown? When I confronted him during our next call, his explanation came too quickly, too rehearsed. It was a last-minute change of plans. "A potential investor lives near your parents," suggested meeting there. "I was going to tell you, but I knew you were swamped with your project deadline." "Did you see my family while you were there?" I asked, my voice tight. A pause. A beat too long. "I ran into your mom at the grocery store." "Pure coincidence." "She insisted I come over for coffee since I was in town." Something in his voice was wrong, but I couldn't quite pinpoint it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the distance and stress were making me insecure. I dove deeper into my project, trying to ignore the growing unease. 3 weeks later, during spring break, I decided to surprise Noah by driving to his apartment instead of going home. I hadn't told my family either. The thought of another tense dinner, with Brittany's increasingly blatant flirtation towards Noah, was more than I could bear. When I arrived at Noah's building, his car wasn't. in its usual spot. Acting on a hunch, I drove to his office. Still no car, but his business partner, Ethan, was just leaving. Noah. Ethan looked confused. He took a few days off, said he was visiting family. Noah's family lived in California. Mine lived in Massachusetts. We were in Cambridge. I drove home in a daze, not entirely sure what I was thinking or planning, just driving. 6 hours later, I pulled into my parents' driveway. It was 11 p.m. Robert's car was there. Carol's was there. And parked behind them, unmistakable, was Noah's distinctive blue Subaru, with that small dent in the passenger door from when we'd gone hiking and a rock had hit it. The house was dark, save for the living room. I used my key, entering quietly, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they would hear it. I crept towards the low voices, stopping just at the living room entrance, partially hidden by the hallway wall. Noah sat on our couch, Brittany beside him, so close it made my skin crawl. Carol was perched in her favorite armchair, leaning forward animatedly as she spoke. "You two make so much sense together," she was saying. "Olivia is so absorbed in her computer world. She'll never truly appreciate what you're building, Noah. You need someone who understands the social aspects of business, the connections, the networking. Brittany has those skills in abundance." Noah shifted uncomfortably. Olivia has been really distant lately, always working on her project. "That's just how she is," Brittany chimed in, placing her hand on his knee. My blood ran cold, always choosing computers over people. Remember when she skipped my college graduation to attend that tech conference? I gasped silently. I hadn't. I'd skipped it because Brittany had specifically told me not to come after I'd refused to write her final term paper. "I just don't know anymore," Noah continued. "Things were so clear a few months ago." "But you need to think about your future, Noah," Carol pressed. "Brittany can be the perfect partner for a man with your ambitions. The supportive wife who makes the right connections, hosts the right dinner parties. Can you honestly see Olivia doing that? She'd probably wear jeans to a business function and talk about coding all night." I must have made a sound because suddenly all three heads snapped in my direction. The look on Noah's face, shock, instantly mingled with gut-wrenching guilt, told me everything I needed to know. "Olivia." Carol recovered first, a forced smile pasted on her face. "What a surprise. We thought you were staying at school this week." I ignored her, my gaze locked on Noah. "How long has this been going on?" He stood up, moving away from Brittany, a palpable awkwardness between them. "It's not what it looks like, really, because it looks like you've been coming to my family home behind my back," I interrupted, my voice trembling with controlled rage. "It looks like you're sitting here with my mother and sister, discussing our relationship and your doubts about me. What part am I misinterpreting?" "Sweetheart," Carol interjected, stepping towards me. "We're just having a conversation. Noah has been kind enough to visit your father and me occasionally. Is that so wrong? And me ending up here during those visits is pure coincidence," Brittany added, with a smirk that vanished the second Carol shot her a warning glance. "When did these visits start?" I asked Noah directly. He couldn't meet my eyes. "A couple months ago. Your mom called me. Said your dad was having health issues and wanted some company while your mom ran errands. It seemed harmless. Robert had no health issues, and he was currently upstairs, blissfully oblivious, or deliberately absent from this entire charade." Then Noah ran a hand through his dark hair, that familiar gesture, now sickeningly painful to watch. Then it became regular. Your mom would call, say they missed having young people around. I'd stop by when I was in the area. He didn't deny that he'd told me he was somewhere else. "Olivia!" Carol stood, approaching me like I was a wounded animal ready to lash out. "You're overreacting. Noah has been confused about your relationship. That's natural when young people are planning their futures. I simply pointed out that perhaps you two want different things, and suggested my sister as a convenient replacement." I finished for her, the words tasting like ash. "Don't be crude," Carol snapped, her gentle facade cracking. "I merely observed that Brittany might be more aligned with the type of life Noah is building. You've made it abundantly clear that your computers come first. What successful man wants to be second place in his wife's life?" The word, wife, hung in the air, heavy, suffocating. Noah and I had talked about moving in together, but marriage had only ever been an implied someday. I turned to Noah. Do you agree with her assessment? That I'm too focused on my career to be a good partner to you? He hesitated, and in that agonizing hesitation, I had my answer. Olivia, he finally said, you have to admit, things have changed. You're always working on your project for graduation. It's temporary. I cut him off, my voice sharp. And you've been equally busy with your startup. I never once doubted your commitment because of it. It's not just that, he continued weakly. Your family has helped me see that maybe we want different futures. My family, I repeated flatly. You mean my mother and the sister who's apparently been pursuing you behind my back? No one's been pursuing anyone, Brittany protested, though her hand still rested possessively on the couch where Noah had been sitting. I laughed, a raw, hollow sound that startled even me. Mom, why? Why would you do this? For a moment, Carol's mask slipped completely, revealing the calculating woman beneath. Let's be practical, Olivia. Brittany needs a successful husband more than you do. You'll always be able to support yourself with your computer job. Brittany needs security, social standing. The brutal honesty, the sheer transactional nature of it, stunned me into silence. Besides, she continued, apparently believing this cold logic would convince me, you are never going to be the right wife for someone like Noah. He needs someone who understands the social requirements of being married to a successful man. Someone who can entertain, who knows the right people, someone who puts family first. I think what your mother means, Noah interjected, finally finding his voice, is that we might want different things in life. No, I think my mother was perfectly clear, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. She decided my sister deserves you more than I do. So, she orchestrated this whole scenario. And you went along with it. I turned to leave, then paused. Where's Dad in all this? Carol's expression tightened. Your father doesn't involve himself in these matters. Which meant, of course, that he knew. And did nothing. Again. I looked at Noah one last time. We're done. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't try to explain. Whatever we had is over. As I walked out, I heard Carol's voice, dismissive, echoing in the hallway. She'll calm down eventually. Olivia has always been dramatic about these things. I got in my car and drove. I drove until I couldn't see through my tears anymore, pulling over at a highway rest stop. I called the only person I could trust. Harper, I choked out. I need help. Everything's falling apart. The next few weeks were a blur of numb exhaustion. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and certainly couldn't focus on completing my final semester. After 4 years pouring my heart into my degree, I made the agonizing decision to withdraw, just 2 months shy of graduation. My academic advisor, usually so composed, was visibly shocked. This isn't like you, Olivia, she'd said during our meeting. Whatever is happening, we can work around it. Extensions, incomplete grades. But the thought of remaining in Cambridge, where every coffee shop and library corner held a memory of Noah, was unbearable. More importantly, I couldn't face graduation with no one in the audience truly cheering for me. The carefully constructed facade of my life had utterly shattered. Harper, bless her, offered me her couch until I could figure out my next move. Her tiny apartment became my refuge as I cycled through grief, blinding rage, and paralyzing self-doubt. Some days I couldn't even drag myself out of bed, Carol's cruel words replaying on a loop. Brittany needs a successful husband more than you do. Had my entire family relationship been nothing more than a competition I didn't even realize I was in? Your mother is genuinely the most toxic person I've ever heard of, Harper declared one evening as we devoured a pint of ice cream. And I once had a roommate who stole my identity and opened 3 credit cards. Despite her attempts at humor, I could see Harper's growing concern. After a week of me barely moving from the couch, she gently suggested therapy. Just a few sessions, she urged. My cousin went after her divorce and said it changed her life. Mostly to appease her, I agreed. Dr. Linden, my therapist, was a woman in her 50s with kind, knowing eyes and a direct manner that cut through my mental fog. What your family did was a profound betrayal, she told me in our first session. Your feelings are completely valid, but you have choices now about what role they play in your future. Over the next few months, those weekly sessions became my lifeline. Dr. Linden helped me connect the dots, seeing patterns in my family dynamics that extended far beyond this final, brutal betrayal. More importantly, she helped me understand that I didn't have to keep participating in them. Your mother's behavior suggests deeply rooted insecurities that she's projecting onto both you and your sister, Dr. Linden explained. But her issues don't have to become your issues. By August, I'd made a decision. I applied to complete my degree at the University of Washington in Seattle, as far from both Boston and California as I could reasonably get. With my MIT transcript and glowing recommendations from professors, I was accepted with a scholarship that would cover my final semester. Saying goodbye to Harper was incredibly hard. She had been my unwavering rock during the darkest period of my life. "You better video call me every week," she demanded fiercely as we hugged at the airport. "And I'm coming to your graduation with an embarrassingly large sign and air horns." Seattle felt like finally breathing fresh air after being suffocated underwater. The city's unique blend of cutting-edge technology and breathtaking natural beauty suited me perfectly. I found a tiny studio apartment near campus and meticulously decorated it with absolutely nothing that reminded me of my past. No family photos, no mementos from MIT, no traces of Noah. My phone remained largely silent. Noah had tried calling and texting for the first few weeks after our confrontation. His messages evolved from defensive, "You didn't give me a chance to explain," to apologetic, "I made a terrible mistake," to pathetically nostalgic, "Remember when we watched the meteor shower on my roof?" I never responded, eventually blocking his number. My parents' communications followed a predictable pattern. Carol acted as if nothing had happened, sending chatty texts about neighborhood gossip and Brittany's latest adventures. Robert sent occasional, brief messages, usually devoid of any real content. "Hope you're doing well." Neither directly acknowledged the betrayal. I responded minimally to Robert and not at all to Carol. Through social media, which I rarely checked anymore, I learned that Noah and Brittany were officially dating. 2 months later, they were engaged. The announcement featured a photo of them with a beaming Carol positioned proudly between them. Robert stood slightly apart, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. I deactivated all my accounts that day. With my social media gone and my old connections fading, I poured every ounce of my energy into rebuilding my life. I completed my degree with honors, attending the ceremony with Harper and her family, but no one from my own. After graduation, I accepted an entry-level position at a mid-sized tech company in downtown Seattle. The salary was modest, but the role offered invaluable experience and, more importantly, a crucial foot in the door of the vibrant Seattle tech scene. Slowly, deliberately, I built a new friend circle. There was Kim, from the rock climbing gym, who practically dragged me out for weekend hikes, insisting physical activity was essential for mental health. Aaron and David, a couple from my apartment building, adopted me into their friend group after discovering my comically empty refrigerator when they brought over misdelivered mail. And then there was Lena from work, whose quiet competence and dry humor made our long coding sessions enjoyable rather than just tolerable. These new friends knew nothing of my family drama. To them, I was simply Olivia from the East Coast who didn't talk much about home. They accepted this without question, filling our time together with present joys rather than dredging up past sorrows. 1 year after moving to Seattle, I received a text from Robert that finally acknowledged reality. "Brittany and Noah's wedding this weekend. Your mother asks if you've changed your mind about attending." I hadn't been invited. I hadn't expected to be. I responded simply, "No." Robert's reply came hours later. "I understand. I'm sorry, Olivia." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd received from any of them. And while it felt painfully insufficient, it did open a thin channel of communication between us. We began exchanging occasional texts, nothing deep, usually just brief life updates. He never mentioned Carol or Brittany, and I never asked. Through this minimal connection, I learned that Noah's startup had failed 6 months after their wedding. He was now working for a competitor of the company he'd founded, a significant step down from CEO. Brittany was, predictably, between jobs again. They had moved into my parents' guest house temporarily, while Noah regrouped. This information should have brought satisfaction, perhaps even joy. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow emptiness. Their struggles didn't undo my pain or restore what I'd lost. Success, I realized, would be the best revenge. Not because it would hurt them, but quiet, steady strength. Daniel's patience allowed me to set the pace, never rushing intimacy or declarations of feeling. When I finally told him I was falling in love with him, 8 months after our first date, his response was both joyful and profoundly reassuring. "I've been in love with you since our third project meeting," he admitted, a soft laugh in his voice. "When you demolished my security protocol design and then immediately rebuilt it, better than before, I knew then you were someone special." Still, I kept my deepest wounds hidden. Daniel knew I was estranged from my family, but not the devastating why. That changed after a year together when he invited me to Vancouver to meet his parents during Lunar New Year celebrations. The Lee family welcomed me with such genuine warmth. Watching their interactions, the teasing affection, the arguments that resolved with laughter, the unquestioned support, brought both deep joy and an ache of comparison I couldn't suppress. After we returned to Seattle, Daniel found me crying in our hotel room. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Did my family overwhelm you? My mother can be intense, I know." "No, your family is wonderful." I managed through tears. "It's just, they made me see what I never had." That night, I finally shared the full story. MIT, Noah, Carol's manipulation, Brittany's betrayal, Robert's heartbreaking complicity. The shattered life I'd fled, and the new one I'd painstakingly built from the broken pieces. Daniel listened without interruption, his expression shifting from shock to anger to deep, unwavering compassion. When I finished, he took my hands in his. "Thank you for trusting me with this. I understand now why trust is so difficult for you." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What they did was unforgivable. But I need you to know something. Not everyone will betray you. I won't betray you." "You can't promise that," I whispered, tears welling again. "I can promise to try every single day to be worthy of your trust," he replied, his voice firm yet gentle. "And I can promise that if we ever have conflicts or doubts, I'll bring them directly to you, not to anyone else." His response wasn't a blanket reassurance that my fears were unfounded. Instead, it acknowledged the brutal reality of my experience while offering a different, braver path forward. That honesty meant more than 1,000 empty promises never to hurt me ever could have. Our relationship deepened immeasurably after that night. With my history no longer a shadow between us, I could finally, fully embrace the possibility of a future together. Daniel became not just my partner, but my closest friend, challenging me when I needed challenging and supporting me when I needed support. 2 years into our relationship, during a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands, Daniel proposed. The ring was an emerald, not a diamond, set in a design he'd helped create. "It reminded me of your eyes," he explained. An emerald symbolized truth and love. Both seem appropriate. Even though I'd known this moment might come, I found myself hesitating. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice small. "My family baggage is considerable." Daniel just smiled. "I'm not marrying your family, Olivia. I'm asking to marry you, Olivia Sterling, with all your brilliance and strength and carefully protected heart. Will you build a life with me?" "Yes," I said, the word bursting forth, carrying all the certainty I never thought I'd feel again. "Yes, I will." We planned a small, intimate wedding with just our closest friends. I didn't invite my family, though I did send Robert a brief text letting him know I was getting married. His response was typically understated. "Congratulations. I hope you'll be very happy." No mention of attending. No questions about Daniel. I hadn't expected otherwise. Our wedding day was perfect in its simplicity. Harper served as my maid of honor, flying in from Boston with her new fiancé. Daniel's sister, Chloe, was a bridesmaid, and his college roommate, Caleb, stood as best man. We exchanged vows in a lush garden overlooking Puget Sound, surrounded by 40 people who truly cared about us. "Today I choose you," Daniel said in his vows, his voice ringing with conviction. "And I'll choose you again tomorrow, and every day after that." My own vows acknowledged the winding journey. "You taught me that trust isn't naive. It's the bravest choice we can make." I trust you with my heart, my future, and all the dreams we'll build together. After the wedding, life expanded in unexpected, exhilarating ways. Daniel and I combined our technical expertise to launch a healthcare data security startup. The timing was impeccable. Increased regulations around patient data privacy created an immediate, surging market for our solutions. Within 18 months, we'd grown from just the two of us working evenings and weekends to a company of 20 employees, backed by significant venture funding. Success, however, brought a visibility I hadn't anticipated. Our company was featured in prominent tech publications and local business journals. I gave interviews about data security, presented at conferences. Though I used my married name professionally, Olivia Lee, it was only a matter of time before my past and present inevitably collided. That collision came in the form of a LinkedIn message from Noah Miller. "Congratulations on your success. You always were the brilliant one. We'd love to catch up sometime." I showed the message to Daniel, who merely raised an eyebrow. "What do you want to do?" "Nothing," I replied. "He's not part of my life anymore." I deleted the message without responding, but it undeniably triggered thoughts about my family that I'd managed to suppress for years. Through those occasional texts with Robert, I knew that Noah and Brittany's marriage was, predictably, struggling. His career had never recovered from his startup's spectacular failure, and Brittany had grown resentful of their financial dependence on my parents. Carol, apparently, still controlled the family narrative, painting me as the ungrateful daughter who had selfishly abandoned them. Then came news that changed everything. Robert had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. His text was characteristically understated. "Doctor says 6 to 12 months. Would like to see you before then." After years of carefully maintained emotional distance, I found myself at a profound crossroads. The hurt remained, sharp and present. But so, too, did earlier, softer memories. Robert teaching me to ride a bike, sneaking me extra dessert when Carol wasn't looking, quietly encouraging my academic interests even when he didn't quite understand them. "I think I need to go," I told Daniel that evening, my voice thick with emotion. "Then we'll go," he replied, simply unequivocally. Together. The decision to reconnect with my family, spearheaded by Robert's devastating news, opened the door to a confrontation years in the making. A confrontation that would finally bring everything full circle in ways I never, ever could have anticipated. After careful consideration, Daniel and I decided that rather than visiting my family home, where Carol would control every micro-interaction, we would invite them to Seattle. The distance would provide me with much-needed emotional space and the distinct home field advantage I knew I'd need for such a loaded reunion. "We'll host them at our place," Daniel suggested. "That way, you can set the terms of engagement." Our place was a stunning waterfront property on Mercer Island, a home we'd purchased after our company's second round of funding. The modern glass and cedar structure, with its expansive views of Lake Washington, reflected our success in a way words couldn't. And yes, I admit, I wasn't above wanting my family to see exactly what I'd built without them. I called Robert directly to extend the invitation. His voice, thinner and more fragile than I remembered, brightened perceptibly when I suggested the visit. "We could come next month," he said. "Your mother and I. And would it be all right if Brittany and Noah came, too? They're living with us now, and your mother doesn't want to leave Brittany alone while we're gone." The request sent a jolt of ice through my veins. Seeing my parents after 6 years would be challenging enough. Facing Noah and Brittany felt utterly impossible. But I recognized the manipulation instantly. Carol was ensuring I couldn't have any private time alone with Robert. "Everyone is welcome," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. "We have plenty of room." Daniel squeezed my hand in support as I ended the call. "Are you sure about this? Including Noah and Brittany?" "No," I admitted, a sigh escaping me. "But I need to do this completely. No more shadows hanging over us." The month before their visit passed quickly. Between preparing our home and managing our rapidly growing company, I had little time to dwell on anxiety. Daniel, ever thoughtful, arranged for a private chef to handle the first night's dinner, understanding that cooking for the people who had hurt me so deeply would be an unfair burden. The day of their arrival, I stood in our living room, gazing out over the water, trying desperately to center myself. Daniel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Remember," he said softly, his voice a grounding anchor, "you're not that vulnerable girl anymore. You're Olivia Lee, co-founder and CTO of Lee Secure, with 14 patents and a waiting list of clients. More importantly, you're a woman who rebuilt her life from scratch. Nothing they say or do can take that away." The doorbell chimed precisely at 4 o'clock. Carol had always valued punctuality. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Robert stood closest, dramatically thinner than I remembered, his skin bearing the yellowish tint characteristic of his disease. Despite his obvious illness, his eyes lit up at the sight of me. "Olivia," he said, his voice catching. Without a second thought, I stepped forward to embrace him, his body feeling frail, almost ephemeral, beneath my arms. Carol stood just behind him, barely aged from my memory. Her critical eyes took me in, then immediately shifted to assess our home, visible through the open door. "You look well," she said, her tone subtly implying surprise at this fact. "Thank you for having us." Brittany and Noah hung back awkwardly. My sister had gained weight. Her once model-esque figure was softer, her carefully maintained blonde hair now showing dark roots. Beside her, Noah looked almost exactly as I remembered, though a new tension lined his face, and his once confident posture had visibly diminished. "Please come in," I said, stepping back to allow them entry. "Daniel is looking forward to meeting you all." As they entered our home, I watched their expressions. Carol's practiced neutrality couldn't quite mask her shock at the obvious luxury. Brittany's eyes widened, darting from the vaulted ceilings to the designer furniture, to the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the stunning lake view. Noah seemed to physically shrink as he took in the sheer scale of the success I'd achieved without him. Daniel appeared from his office, the consummate host. Tall, distinguished in casual linen pants and a light blue button-down that complemented his warm complexion, he radiated confidence without a hint of arrogance. "Welcome to Seattle," he greeted them, shaking hands with Robert, then Carol. When he reached Noah, there was a brief, charged moment as the two men assessed each other. Daniel's smile never wavered, but I saw it. Noah recognized something in my husband's eyes. A quiet, unwavering knowledge of exactly who Noah was and what he had done. "We've prepared the guest rooms upstairs," Daniel continued smoothly. "Why don't you all get settled before dinner? Olivia can show you the way." As I led my family upstairs, Carol fell into step beside me. "This is quite a home," she remarked. "Your husband must be very successful." "We both are, Mother," I replied evenly. "I co-founded our company with Daniel. We're equal partners in every sense." She absorbed this information with a tight smile. "How progressive." I showed them to their rooms. Robert and Carol in the main guest suite, Brittany and Noah in the smaller room across the hall. As they unpacked, I retreated downstairs to find Daniel opening wine in the kitchen. "They're exactly as you described," he said quietly. "Your mother started assessing the property value within 30 seconds of arrival." I laughed, despite my tension. "Just wait until dinner. She'll be counting the silver." The private chef Daniel had arranged prepared an exquisite meal. As we gathered around our gleaming dining table, the conversation remained superficial. Seattle weather, their flight, Robert's treatment options. Daniel expertly filled awkward silences with questions about Boston and astute observations about the differences between Canadian and American healthcare systems. It was during dessert that Carol finally, inevitably, broached the subject of our company. "So," she said, setting down her fork with precision, "Olivia mentioned you run a business together. What exactly do you do?" Daniel glanced at me, silently offering me the chance to answer. I took it. "We founded Lee Secure 4 years ago," I explained. "We specialize in healthcare data security systems. Our software protects patient information while allowing authorized access across different healthcare providers." "Lee Secure," Carol repeated. "You took Daniel's name for the company?" "It tested better with focus groups," I replied smoothly, though the real reason was simpler. I'd wanted nothing of my past associated with my future. "They're being modest," Robert interjected, surprising everyone. "I looked up their company before we came. They were featured in Forbes last year. Healthcare Security Revolution, the article called it." Carol's eyebrows rose fractionally. "How impressive!" Noah cleared his throat. What's your market valuation now? Last funding round, Daniel answered casually. Our valuation was just over $300 million. We're not looking for additional investment, currently. We're cash flow positive and growing sustainably. The figure hung in the air, $300 million. Noah's failed startup had peaked at a $4 million valuation before collapsing. $300 million, Brittany repeated, looking at Noah with an expression I couldn't quite read. That's... wow. Enough about business, Carol interjected briskly. Olivia, will you and Daniel be starting a family soon? You're not getting any younger. Mom, Brittany protested weakly. It's a reasonable question, Carol defended. They have this enormous house. Seems a shame not to fill it with children. We're focused on our company right now, Daniel answered diplomatically, but we haven't ruled out children in the future. Carol turned to me. You always said you wanted children, Olivia. Remember those dolls you used to line up in your room? You had names for all of them. I had no such memory. Brittany had been the one obsessed with dolls. This subtle rewriting of history was so typical of Carol that I almost laughed. If Olivia and I decide to have children, Daniel said, his voice gentle but firm, it will be on our timeline, not anyone else's. Carol's smile tightened, unaccustomed to being challenged so politely yet definitively. As the evening progressed, the underlying dynamics became increasingly, painfully clear. Carol attempted to reassert control through passive-aggressive comments and selective memories. Robert observed quietly, occasionally catching my eye with what seemed like a silent apology. Brittany fluctuated between feigned interest in our lives and thinly veiled envy. And Noah grew progressively more uncomfortable, drinking too much wine and barely contributing to the conversation. By the time we moved to the living room for after-dinner drinks, the fragile facade of pleasant family reunion had worn dangerously thin. How are things in Boston? I asked, deliberately vague. A weighted silence followed. Robert stared into his whiskey. Carol smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. We're between opportunities at the moment, Brittany finally answered. Noah's exploring several promising positions. I see, I replied. And you're living with Mom and Dad while you explore? Temporarily, Noah said quickly. My non-compete clause from Growth Tech just expired, so I can finally look at other startups in the same space. It's been 3 years, Brittany added, a sharp edge to her voice. A very long temporary arrangement. We're happy to help family through difficult transitions, Carol said pointedly. That's what families do. They support each other through challenges. The implication hung heavily in the air. I had abandoned my family responsibilities by cutting contact. Daniel, sensing the rising tension, stood. Would anyone like to see the garden? We'd just installed a Japanese-inspired meditation area overlooking the water. Robert rose eagerly. I'd enjoy that. As the others followed Daniel outside, I remained behind to refresh drinks. Noah lingered awkwardly, handling his empty glass. Your husband seems like a good man, he said finally. He is, I replied simply. You've done incredibly well for yourself, Olivia. I always knew you would. I looked at him directly for the first time that evening. Did you? Because I recall you agreeing that I was too focused on my career to be a good partner. That I'd never understand the social aspects of business. He flushed. I was confused. Your mother can be very persuasive. Yes, she can be. But we all make our own choices, Noah. He set down his glass. I made the wrong one. Surely you know that by now. Before I could respond, Robert appeared in the doorway. Olivia, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Noah nodded awkwardly and slipped past Robert toward the garden. My father took a seat on the couch, his movements slow and deliberate. Your home is beautiful, he said, his gaze sweeping around. But more importantly, you seem happy. I am, I confirmed. I owe you an apology, he continued, his voice slow, heavy with regret. Many apologies, actually. I failed you, Olivia. I knew what your mother and Brittany were doing with Noah, and I did nothing to stop it. The directness of his admission startled me. Why not? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He sighed heavily. Cowardice, mainly. I've spent 40 years taking the path of least resistance with your mother. It was easier to let her have her way than to fight battles I didn't think I could win. He looked up, his eyes damp with unshed tears. But that's no excuse for letting her hurt you. For hurting you myself, through inaction. His sincere regret finally pierced the armor I'd built around my heart. I needed you to stand up for me, Dad. I know, and I'll regret it until my dying day that I didn't. He reached for my hand, clasping it gently. I don't expect forgiveness, Olivia. I just wanted you to know that I see clearly now what happened, and I'm deeply sorry for my part in it. From the garden, raised voices suddenly drew our attention. Through the windows, I could see Carol and Brittany in what appeared to be a heated discussion, with Daniel standing calmly between them. We should join them, Robert suggested, pushing himself up. Your mother becomes unpredictable when challenged. In the garden, the scene became glaringly clear as we approached. Carol was berating Daniel about something, while Brittany stood nearby, arms crossed defensively. Absolutely inappropriate to suggest such a thing. Carol was saying, our financial arrangements are private family matters. Daniel shook his head. That's not what I said. I simply observed that multi-generational living can create complex financial interdependencies that sometimes prevent people from making fully independent choices. Carol's face flushed with anger. You know nothing about our family. On the contrary, Daniel replied calmly, his voice unwavering. I know a great deal about your family, from Olivia's perspective. I know about the manipulation, the favoritism, the betrayal. Daniel, I warned softly, though a part of me thrilled to hear someone finally confront Carol directly, unapologetically. Betrayal is a strong word. Carol sniffed, trying to regain control. Family matters are complicated. Olivia has always had a flair for drama and a selective memory. Mom, Brittany interrupted, surprising everyone, including me. Stop. Just stop. Carol turned to her in shock. Excuse me. He's right. Brittany continued, her voice shaking raw. We both know what you did with Noah. What we did. It was wrong. Noah, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Your mother told me Olivia was seeing someone else at MIT. That she was using me as a backup plan while pursuing a professor she was interested in. I gasped. That's completely untrue. I know that now, he said quietly, his gaze meeting mine for a fleeting second. But at the time, it made sense of why you were so busy, why you seemed distant. Your mother showed me texts from your phone that seemed to confirm it. I never texted anything like that. I said, my mind racing, trying to piece it together. She must have used my phone, Brittany finished, her voice flat. She had me text things from your old number that she kept in her contacts. Made it look like they were coming from you. Carol's face hardened, a mask of stone. This is absurd. I was simply helping two people who are clearly better suited find their way to each other. By lying, Robert asked, his voice stronger than I'd heard it all weekend, laced with an undeniable anger. By manipulating a young man's feelings and betraying our daughter. I did what was necessary. Carol insisted, unyielding. Brittany needed stability that Olivia didn't. Olivia was always going to be fine on her own. So, you decided to sacrifice my happiness for Brittany's? I asked, the hurt. Still fresh, still burning despite the years. I made a practical decision, Carol replied unapologetically. Brittany's looks were her only real asset. She needed to capitalize on them before they faded. You had your education, your career potential. Mom! Brittany exclaimed, clearly wounded, her face crumpling. Is that really how you see me? As nothing but a pretty face with an expiration date? Carol waved a dismissive hand. Don't be so sensitive. I'm simply being practical. I did what any mother would do, ensured both my daughters' futures as best I could. No, Robert countered, surprising us all with his newfound firmness. You did what served your vision of how things should be. You didn't consider what either of your daughters actually wanted or needed. The garden fell silent, heavy with the weight of revelation. Carol's face registered a profound shock at Robert's rebellion. Brittany looked torn between a desperate vindication and utter devastation at Carol's cruel assessment of her worth. Noah stared at the ground, the full, sickening extent of his manipulation finally clear to him, to everyone. Daniel moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine, a silent, powerful anchor. I think, I said finally, my voice a little hoarse, that we've all had enough truth for one evening. Let's continue this conversation tomorrow, after everyone's had some rest. As we headed inside, Noah caught my arm gently. Olivia, I need you to know how sorry I am. I should have trusted what we had. I should have talked to you directly. I looked at the man I had once loved so deeply. Now, a diminished figure, trapped in a marriage built on lies. Yes, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You should have. Later that night, as Daniel and I prepared for bed, he asked, Are you okay? That was intense. I considered the question carefully. I think I am. 4 years, I've carried this wound, never fully understanding how deep the deception went. Now I know. And strangely, that helps. Your sister surprised me, he observed. I didn't expect her to break ranks with your mother. Me neither, I admitted, a flicker of something new, hope? Stirring within me. Maybe there's hope for her yet. Daniel pulled me close. What happens now with your family? I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I don't know exactly, but for the first time, I think there might be a path forward. At least with Robert. And maybe, eventually, with Brittany. Carol, that's more complicated. Whatever you decide, Daniel said, kissing my forehead. I'm with you every step of the way. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized that the confrontation had shifted something fundamental within me. The people who had once held such power over my happiness now seemed smaller, less significant. They hadn't determined my fate after all. I had. The morning after our confrontation brought a strange, almost ethereal calm to the house. Robert joined me for early coffee on the deck, watching the sunrise paint the lake in gold and pink hues. We sat in comfortable silence for a while before he spoke. I had a long talk with your mother last night, he said, his thin hands cradling his mug, one of many we should have had years ago. I told her things need to change if she wants any relationship with you going forward. And how did that go? I asked, already knowing the answer. He smiled ruefully. About as well as you'd expect. She's not used to ultimatums, especially from me. What about you, Dad? What do you want? I pressed. He looked out over the water, considering. I want whatever time I have left, to be honest. No more pretending. No more enabling behavior that hurts the people I love. He turned to me, his eyes earnest. And I want to know my daughter again if she's willing. Over the next 3 days, our family dynamics shifted in ways I never anticipated. Robert and I spent hours talking, meticulously filling in the gaping holes of our lost years. I showed him our company offices, introduced him to colleagues, shared the work that now filled me with purpose. He listened with genuine interest, asking insightful questions that reminded me of the thoughtful man who had encouraged my early curiosity about computers. I'm proud of you, Olivia, he told me as we walked along the waterfront one afternoon. Not just because of your success, though that's remarkable. I'm proud of the woman you've become. Strong, compassionate, resilient. You created this life despite us, not because of us. His cancer made our reconciliation painfully bittersweet. Our relationship rebuilt, but with an expiration date looming. Yet, there was an undeniable grace in having this time, in clearing away the debris of the past before saying goodbye. With Brittany, healing came more tentatively. The morning after the confrontation, she asked if I'd walk with her around the neighborhood. I don't even know where to start, she said, as we strolled past waterfront mansions. Sorry seems inadequate. Why did you do it? I asked, the question that had haunted me for years, finally escaping my lips. She was quiet for a long moment. At first, it was just flattering to have someone like Noah interested in me. Mom kept saying what a good match we'd be. How much more I deserve someone successful than you did. She glanced at me, her eyes raw. I know how awful that sounds now. And later, when I knew how much it hurt you, by then I was trapped in Mom's narrative. If what we'd done wasn't justified, then I was just terrible. It was easier to believe you'd be fine, that you didn't need Noah like I did. She stopped walking, turning to face me. The truth is, I was weak. I let Mom make my decisions because taking responsibility for my own life was scary. Her raw honesty surprised me. When did that change? I asked. Watching you yesterday. Successful, confident, genuinely happy with Daniel. It made me see what taking control of your own life actually looks like. She sighed, a deep, weary sound. I'm 35, living in our parents' guest house, in a failing marriage, with no career or purpose. Mom still buys my clothes and tells me how to wear my hair. I felt an unexpected pang of empathy. While Carol had betrayed me, she had, in many ways, infantilized Brittany, keeping her dependent and diminished. It's not too late to change that, I said carefully. How? The desperation in her voice was palpable. I considered my response. Start with something small but meaningful. Get a job, any job, that's yours alone. Open a bank account only in your name. Build from there. Over the following days, we had several similar conversations. I didn't offer forgiveness, that would take time, but I did offer perspective and practical advice. To my surprise, Brittany listened. My relationship with Carol remained the most complicated. After the confrontation, she retreated into cool politeness, meticulously maintaining the fiction that she had acted in everyone's best interests. On their final evening with us, however, as Daniel and Robert discussed baseball in the living room, and Brittany helped our housekeeper with dishes, Carol found me alone on the deck. You've done well for yourself, she said, an admission that clearly cost her dearly. Better than I expected. Thank you, I replied, not taking the bait of her qualified praise. I still believe I did what was necessary at the time, she continued, her gaze fixed on the darkening water. But I recognize that my methods were perhaps overly controlling. Coming from Carol, this was the closest thing to an apology I was ever likely to receive. I won't pretend what you did didn't hurt me deeply, I said, my voice steady. But I've built a good life. A life that makes me happy. She nodded, still looking out at the water rather than at me. Your father wants us to seek counseling. Family therapy, he calls it. I couldn't hide my surprise. And you agreed? It's important to him. She smoothed her slacks, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. Would you consider joining us occasionally? Not regularly, of course. I know you're busy. The request, halting and uncomfortable, revealed a vulnerability I'd genuinely never seen in her before. I'll think about it, I promised, not ready to commit, but unwilling to refuse outright. She accepted this with a nod, and we stood in silence watching the sunset. Two women with a broken past and an uncertain future, but perhaps a sliver of possibility between us. The most surprising conversation came from Noah, who asked to speak with me privately before their departure. Daniel raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the request. Are you comfortable with that? He asked. Yes, I assured him. There's nothing he could say that would affect us. Noah and I sat in the garden, the space between us filled with history and regret. I wanted to thank you, he began, which was certainly not what I expected. For what? For not hating me, he said simply. You would be justified. I considered this. Hate requires energy, Noah. I'd rather direct mine elsewhere. Besides, I've come to understand how thoroughly you were manipulated. That doesn't excuse my choices, he said, showing more self-awareness than I remembered him possessing. I betrayed your trust. I let myself be convinced that what we had wasn't real or valuable. He hesitated. Seeing you with Daniel, the way he looks at you, the respect between you, it's made me realize what I gave up. I tensed, worried this was heading toward an inappropriate confession. He noticed and quickly added, I'm not saying this to disrupt your life or suggest anything inappropriate. I want you to know that I recognize what I lost. The person I hurt. My biggest regret isn't the failed startup or the career setbacks. It's that I let someone else define what should have mattered most to me. His sincerity seemed genuine, his regret palpable. What will you do now? I asked. He sighed. Start over, I think. Brittany and we've been pretending for years. Neither of us is happy. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I truly meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish the misery. Don't be, he said, a faint smile touching his lips. It's time for both of us to face reality and make better choices. He stood to leave, then paused. You deserved better, Olivia. I'm glad you found it. After they left, our house felt simultaneously emptier and lighter. The confrontation had been painful, yes, but undeniably necessary, clearing away festering wounds and replacing them with clear-eyed understanding. I couldn't change the past, but I could, finally, choose how it affected my future. In the months that followed, we established new patterns of connection. Robert and I spoke weekly by phone and video chat as his condition deteriorated. I flew to Boston twice to spend precious time with him. Difficult visits, yes, but ones that nevertheless brought a deep peace to both of us. When he passed away 8 months after our reunion, I stood beside Carol and Brittany at his funeral. United in grief, if not yet in full reconciliation. After Robert's death, Brittany surprised everyone by actually following through on her promises to change. She filed for divorce from Noah, moved into her own apartment, and found work as an administrative assistant at a community college. The position was modest, but represented an independence she'd never known. We maintained cautious but increasingly warm contact, slowly rebuilding a relationship that had been poisoned since childhood. Carol remained Carol, critical, controlling, resistant to change. But our confrontation had permanently shifted the power dynamic. She could no longer rewrite history or manipulate me. I engaged with her on my terms, or not at all. It wasn't a warm relationship, but it was, for the first time, an honest one. With my family receding to their appropriate, no longer dominating, place in my life, Daniel and I focused on our future. Our company continued to thrive, expanding internationally and developing new security protocols that became industry standards. 2 years after the family confrontation, we welcomed our daughter, Grace, followed 18 months later by our son, Leo. Becoming parents ourselves cast my family history into even sharper relief. As I held my children, I made silent, fervent promises, never to play favorites, to see and celebrate them for exactly who they were, to let them chart their own courses with unwavering support rather than suffocating control. Watching Daniel with our children, patient, attentive, delighting in their uniqueness, I often reflected on how completely my life had transformed from what it might have been. Had Carol not orchestrated that betrayal, had Noah and I married as once planned, would I have found this level of fulfillment? The painful truth was that their betrayal, while devastating, had ultimately freed me to build something far, far better than I might have otherwise. This wasn't about forgiving the unforgivable or trying to find silver linings in trauma. It was about recognizing that our worst moments don't define us unless we let them. That sometimes the path forward requires leaving behind not just people who hurt us, but also dreams and expectations that no longer serve us. The ultimate victory wasn't financial success or professional recognition, though those were gratifying. It wasn't even the beautiful family Daniel and I created, precious as they were. The true victory was internal. The profound, unshakable knowledge that I had rebuilt myself from broken pieces into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. On my daughter Grace's 3rd birthday, as our home filled with friends and laughter, I caught sight of myself in a window reflection. The woman looking back bore little resemblance to the devastated girl who had once fled her family's betrayal. This woman stood tall, confident in her worth, surrounded by a love she had chosen, and that had chosen her in return. I often think about the question of forgiveness. Have I forgiven Carol, Brittany, Noah? Not entirely. Some betrayals leave permanent marks. But I've released the anger that once threatened to define me. I've learned that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And I've found peace in allowing those who hurt me to occupy an appropriate space in my heart and history. Acknowledged, but no longer central. The journey from that devastating betrayal to this peaceful place wasn't linear or simple. It required confronting painful truths, setting firm boundaries, and most importantly, believing I deserved better. Perhaps that's the most valuable lesson of all, that our capacity for happiness expands when we truly believe we're worthy of it. So if you're facing betrayal or heartbreak right now, remember this. The people who hurt you don't get to decide your worth. They don't get to write the ending to your story. That power belongs to you alone. Sometimes, life's greatest gifts come disguised as its cruelest blows, redirecting us toward paths we might never have chosen, but that lead to places far better than we imagined. What painful experience, what profound heartbreak, has ultimately led you to something better, something more aligned with your true self. Share your story, your resilience in the comments below. I'm reading every single one. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more personal stories of turning trauma into triumph. Thank you for listening.